I'm going to be showing you a presentation that we made to the Washington Public Ports Association back in November. So some of the slides will be, I'm going to run through them fairly quick because they don't apply here, but I think you might get the idea that there's some things finally starting to happen out at the port when we get through with this. First thing that we did with the Washington Public Ports is we talked about the fact that there are actually 5 port districts in Mason County: Duwato, Allen, Hoodsport, Grapeview, and then of course the port of Shelton. Our properties, of course, as everyone knows, we have Sanderson Field, we have Oakland Bay Marina, and we have, well, of course, there we go, Johns Prairie. And we'll come back to those items in just a minute. One of the things that we talk about quite a bit at the port are the demographics of this area, because obviously ports, we are in the business of business. And one of the things that we know here in Mason County, the unemployment rate has been a little bit difficult to deal with. We're, as of September in 2012, we're sitting on 10.9%. But one of the most important things to look at is when you look at that graph and you look at the spikes on a year-by-year basis, you also see quite a bit of sub-spikes in that. So what it really says is we have a lot of seasonal employment around Mason County. We know that our primary industries, this isn't working too, there we go, is timber, seafood, and aerospace. The downside is that we're running on about $16.34 per hour is the average rate. The state average is $24.16. So we've got quite a bit of growth to go here to get it back up to at least something that's fairly decent. But probably the biggest thing that sticks in my mind is that last line down there when you look at 43% of our labor force has to go to another county to get a paycheck. That's huge. That means we really don't have, or we're missing opportunity here in this county. So in our presentation we talked about Simpson. I'm not going to waste too much time on this. Most of you in this room could probably tell me more about the history of Simpson. Same thing with Rayonier. The next one, let's see if we can get it to work. Come on, don't die now. There we go. Certified aerospace, and well, understand the story about how the junk bond kings came into town, bought the company, British financier walks in, 2 years later sells off all the assets and takes out 400 jobs. Not really one of the best things. We now have a new company called TrueFab down in the bottom. They just started in 2010, and believe it or not, we're starting up again, and I'm rather optimistic. We'll talk some more about them in just a minute. Let's see if we can get this. Are we not flipping? There we go. There's some basic operating principles we run the port by. Number one, never forget your history. History is a great lesson that teaches you all kinds of things. You just don't want to repeat the same mistakes. The second thing that we operate by is that businesses seek locations where they are wanted. It's a very simple basic principle. If you don't want them here, they won't come here. If there's consternation in the ranks, guess what? They're not going to come here. The third thing we look at is cash flow, and that is everything. If it takes a company 6 months to get permitted, that's cash flow out of their pocket. They're not going to want to come here. Transportation to market. Unfortunately, we're not on the I-5 corridor, but we're only 30 minutes away, so we're not too far out, and maybe we can offset that with the cost of living that's out here. Cost of transport to market, cost to acquire materials, etc. Number 4, though, is where I come in very strong on, in that wealth in a community is created when goods and services are produced locally and then sold to customers outside. I can't tell you how important it is to have that cash flow into the community so it can be spent in the community. On our Johns Prairie properties, this is about 400 acres. One of the biggest challenges that the port's had is we've not been able to bring in a new company probably since 1995. And the main problem has been water, our access to it, and Mayor Kranz, of course, addressed that issue. I want to thank PUD 3 for helping us to bring that water line from the city out to serve them. The port had a water line right through here. It was a 16-inch line. My predecessor, Bob Robinson, did a great job of anticipating the water coming out. So we hooked on here and came down to this point right here, turned that over to the city. And we'll show you the pictures here in just a second, but we then transversed that water over to our own water tower. Something a little bit unique that we did, and we started on October 29th and through February 22nd, and I'm just going to see if I can scroll through these very quickly, see if it keeps working. What was unique about the hookup is that we actually brought the water line up our water tower. So city water is now coming up directly here and going inside the actual water tower. And one more. We're locking up again. There we go. Do you want to hit the, no? Okay, well, we passed it by. What I was going to show you, there it is. Finally, 350 gallons per minute flowing into our tanks. That is city water, and we're extremely happy about that. We've still got some paperwork to do, but it is finally working. So, the other thing that we're working on out at Johns Prairie, and you can see Simpson Lumber and Willapa Bay and Shear Brothers and McFarland Cascade up here, and I want to thank PUD for doing all of their wonderful landscaping up through here. It made us really bad, so we're in the process of doing some grading, and we'll be seeding this area out through here, so we're going to create a park-like setting. Should have that done probably in about 90 days. We're also going to be working down here by Willapa Bay and through this area, cleaning it up. One of the challenges you have when you have an industrial development like this, specifically timber industry, is there's a byproduct, and it's usually bark and sawdust. And unfortunately, not every tenant is a good tenant, and some of them don't stay very long. Some file bankruptcy, and so what do you do with the material, et cetera. So we've been accumulating quite a bit of it over here. And let's see if I can get this to flip. Let's see, is this? You can start to see this is Shear Brothers. I got a sneaky feeling I'm going to have to come over there by that computer if we have this. And Simpson, we now have 120,000 cubic yards assembled in one spot. We talked to Waste Management about removing it. They only asked for $7.5 million to do that. So we decided that probably the best thing to do is to shape it, and we're going to start planting some trees on it. And so we'll try to beautify the area up a little bit. And this is the timber harvest that we just completed, about 100 acres there. We cleared about $650,000 for that. The pipe is going to cost us $325,000. So guess what? We're not incurring any debt, and we still have money in the bank. So we're very pleased with that. Yeah. The marina, I'm just going to go very quickly through this. Again, in November, we weren't sure what was going to happen with the marina. We're in a little bit of a fog, which was the purpose behind that photograph. But the moral of the story is we finally formed a Oakland Bay Tenant Advisory Committee, and we've had our second meeting, and I'm extremely pleased about the way that is going. Last meeting, we took a really lengthy walk through the marina, through the docks, and started making our list of things. And in a couple of weeks, we're going to get together again and start prioritizing what we're going to start repairing out there. So I think there's a bright future for our marina. We're still working with Simpson Lumber Company on a property exchange. We have some property down here at Eagle Point, and we would like to acquire this piece of property over here, which is the old log dump. And we're going too far again. One of the goals of that is, if we acquire that, is we would like to join up with the cities, which are park and ride over here, and then continue with the trail on down through and come back on front, cross over Goldsboro and cross over the trains, and then continue right on up and back out towards Eagle Point. And Simpson would like to turn Eagle Point into Conservancy, which in effect would turn that into a park. So I think we might have something that could change maybe the face of downtown Shelton. This is the concept that we have for our property right now, and that is a backfill. And I know when you get into marine environment, you start talking about backfilling, people get a little bit nervous about that. But we did bring in all of the permitting agencies and talked about this concept, and no one said no. So we can still take the next step going forward. Whether it happens or not, don't know, but we're still working down the path. The airport is the airport, and there's an old adage about how liars figure and figures lie. There's an auditor over at the Port of Kennewick named Tammy Fine, and Tammy worked for the state auditor's office for about 5 years. And she's been doing an awful lot of research on airports. They have a challenge with Vista Field over there. And she was looking at the profitability of airports, and she came back to me with a report, and she said, you might like to know this, that there are only 2 airports in the state of Washington that are profitable. Number 1 is SeaTac. Number 2 happens to be Sanderson Field. So, kind of nice to know. I don't know. The properties are broken up. This is our incubator area up through here. We have about 10 or 12 individual buildings, about 5,000 square footers. This is the old certified aerospace that we use, that's still there and being used. This is the aviation side, and of course the fairgrounds down below, and then State Patrol over on the other side. I would have you take a look sometime when you get a chance, go out on the website for the WASDOT Aviation Division and look for this button that says Aviation Economic Impact Calculator. Take a look at that and walk down to Sanderson Field, and forget the profitability right now. You want to take a look at that figure right there. Now this is an older version of it that's been since modified down. This shows the value in gross business income to this community, it's not 53, but it's actually $41 million in annual gross business income to this community. 75% of our traffic at that airport is transient. It's not the local fly guys that everybody likes to think it is. We do an awful lot at Sanderson Field. We have all kinds of events going on. The closed runway on the south side over here services both the military and it also serves for aircraft dismantling operations. I think most of you might remember something like this when they used to bring the 727s in and they brought a 747 in at one time. Well, guess what? We had one of these coming in last year, 737. This is a Southwest Airlines aircraft that was going through what's called a D check, a Delta check. That's where they strip the paint off and they start looking for any abnormalities. And if I can get this to flip. This happens to be at the forward lavatory area, and you start to look at what we call doublers, and they were having some structural integrity issues with this aircraft, and so they put on 2 layers of metal here and 3 layers up here. But what's happening is it's this grayed out area through here that's corroding, so the structural integrity is gone, and you can start to see the gray area coming through the doublers, so the airplane was no longer airworthy, so that's the reason why they took it apart. Military operating over there. On the northern side of our property, we actually have quite a bit of fun. There's a whole bunch of folks that like just plain asphalt, and they come out and visit. One of them is Imagine Lifestyles. They brought out a, okay, here we go again, Lamborghini and a Ferrari, and you can rent time out there, and they'll videotape this, and you can go through their track and have fun. This happens to be Ed Shadle, who brought out the F-104 fighter jet that's had the wings taken off of it. The reason the wings are off it because he's turned it into a land vehicle, and he's hopefully going to make a run at the world land speed record this year. Probably 750 some miles an hour. This is Ed, and I'm sorry I can't remember the woman's name, but she happens to hold the world land speed record on a motorcycle. That's one strong lady. Let's see, continue on. Olympic Air has been the mainstay at Sanderson Field for I can't tell you how many years. Kurt and his wife are kind of slowing down a little bit. They're still doing a lot of helicopter logging and a lot of helicopter maintenance. So the main player, if you will, is Skydive Kapowson. And I don't know if you know much about these folks, but they have actually been probably one of the best sales tools that the Port of Shelton and the airport specifically has had. They jump 20,000 people a year on our airport, including the military. A lot of dignitaries know about this. These 2 individuals, the gentleman on the right happens to be in the Department of Ecology. The gentleman on the left is John Seibold, who's the Aviation Division Director. He's actually now the Director of Rail for the state. They were getting into the back of an airplane, and I can't remember the woman in the pink. She's also, I think, Department of Ecology. John's kind of got a grin on his face. I think I surprised him because I'm in the right seat of the airplane flying the bird. So, different aircraft. I'm just going to scroll through these really quick. Like the military comes out, they use Kapowson's building, but they sometimes will bring their own assets. And you've seen some of these or heard some of these guys flying around. Well, this is what they're doing. They're loading up and they're jumping out. And nice view of Oakland Bay in the background. And that's their landing area that's out there. But what you may not know about Skydive Kapowson is the movie Transformers. And Andy Farrington happens to be has been in Transformers 3 and 4 as doing part of the skydive operation. And he's also going to be in Iron Man 3, which I think is being released this month or next. But what's also fun is Jessie Farrington, the mom, is also in this movie. They needed a woman of 60 years of age or older who could skydive, and so that's what she did. I think Luke has probably been to several of the service meetings and talked about this. I don't know if any of you recognize this yet. Felix Baumgartner, he just set the world record for skydiving at 128,000 feet. But what's most interesting about this to us, and again, part of the advertising and why Shelton is known quite well, is because of this backpack. His parachute was designed by Luke here at Sanderson Field. It was tested here. If you happen to see the video, or the video from
Red Bull.
Yeah, it's Red Bull, but National Geographic. It was on TV about 3 months ago. And Shelton was known quite, it was prominent throughout knowing where they were doing their testing. So Felix, and that happens to be Luke there. We obviously finished our airport master plan, first part of this year. And I'm trying to get through to the, there we go. But probably the most exciting thing, I think, for all of us at the Port of Shelton, and we started to put these numbers together. This, again, is our Johns Prairie location. Those are the companies that are out there. Maybe not known to too many people is McFarland Cascade has sold to a parent company called Stella Jones, and they're out of Canada, out of Montreal. And they're a huge conglomerate, and so we're looking for some good things to come from them. Simpson is starting to build up and starting to turn on some of the mills and access all of the, in fact, they've got a kiln capacity issue right now, and of course shared shipping. We have 66 people employed out there at this point right now. That was as of year-end 2012. What's nice about this is that when you go back to Mason County Forest Products, when they were out there in this particular same area that Simpson is in, they had built up to about 160 employees. So we're starting to see some development coming. Thank God the housing market is slowly starting to come back again. Out at the airport, these are all of our tenants that are there. And obviously Kapowson here, Olympic Air, Brothers, which is a greens company. We have some folks in some offices that are out there. But what's interesting to me is the fact that we have one 30,000 square foot building remaining open here, a sawtooth building, and we have a 20,000 square foot area over here of industrial space left. And that is it that we have there in the center. And this one, up on the north end, where our incubator buildings are at year end, 211 people are employed there. And you can see all of the various companies in here. You can see where Sims has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buildings. This is interesting for us. This is Fungi Perfecti. This is Dr. Stamens. And he picked up this building about 3 years ago, I think, or 2 years ago. He now has these 2 buildings. We only have 2 5,000 square foot buildings left. And if I want to, tomorrow I could rent one of them already, and probably by the end of the month, the other one will be gone. So for the first time in a long time that I can recall, our commissioners are finally going to get the opportunity to have a conversation about what do we want to build next. So it's finally starting to come around, and we're really quite excited about that. When I first came to the port, we had approximately 617 people employed throughout all of the businesses, and that was, let's see, I came in spring of 2009, and it was the figure for the end of 2008. We were at about 615. We're now 588 people employed at the port, and I think we will probably break that record that we had in 2008 by the end of this year. So we're pretty excited about that.